It was late afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of golden hour that makes everything look more expensive than it is. Engines roared in the distance, traffic hummed like a restless crowd, and inside Westline Performance Garage, the smell of gasoline mixed with the sharp scent of ego. The place was spotless, polished floors, chrome tools hanging like trophies, and mechanics who wore their uniforms like armor. Every sound carried confidence. The air was filled with the rhythm of machines and men who thought they could control them. Then the sound changed. Boots. Heavy, slow boots scraping against concrete. Heads turned. At the entrance stood a man no one had seen before. He looked out of place. His hair was grey, messy, his face marked by sun and silence. A rough jacket clung to his shoulders, and his jeans were torn at the knee. He carried no phone, no wallet, no name on his sleeve. Just a pair of hands that looked like they had built the world before the rest of it forgot how. He stepped forward quietly, his voice calm, like someone who didn't need to prove he belonged. "Excuse me," he said. "I can fix that car, if you'll let me eat." The room froze. 3 mechanics exchanged glances, the kind that said, "Is this guy serious?" One of them, young, full of confidence and caffeine, laughed. "Buddy, that's a 7-figure McLaren. You don't fix those for sandwiches." The others chuckled. Someone pulled out a phone, already filming. The man didn't flinch. He simply looked at the McLaren, listening to it the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. "Sensors off," he said softly. "Crankshaft module, left side, burned connector." The laughter got louder. "You hear that?" one of them said. "Didn't even open the hood, and he's diagnosing it from the doorway. You some kind of car whisperer?" The man didn't answer. He just took a step closer, his eyes steady, patient. He wasn't angry. He wasn't begging. He was offering. From the back office, a voice called out, "Everything all right out there?" It was Emily Carter, the shop's co-owner. She walked in with the calm confidence of someone who owned speed for a living. Dark hair tied back, white shirt rolled at the sleeves. She glanced between the man and the group of laughing employees. "What's going on?" The young mechanic grinned. "Guy says he can fix the McLaren if we give him food." Emily looked at the man for a moment. He didn't look desperate, just hungry, and sure of something the others weren't. She asked quietly, "You know this car?" He nodded once. "Enough to hear what's wrong." Emily tilted her head, half curious, half skeptical. The car had been giving them trouble all day, a problem they couldn't quite pin down. Every test said it was fine. Every sound said it wasn't. The man waited. No pride, no pleading, just patience. Emily sighed. "All right, you've got 5 minutes." The laughter stopped. The men exchanged nervous glances. She tossed him a pair of gloves. He didn't put them on. He approached the car slowly, one hand brushing the fender as if greeting an old friend. He crouched beside it, eyes tracing lines invisible to anyone else. Then he reached under the hood, touched a single wire, and turned the key. The engine coughed, once, twice, then roared to life, smooth, flawless, alive. The sound filled the garage. No one moved. No one spoke. The young mechanic's mouth opened slightly, his confidence melting into disbelief. Emily stared at the man, the question already forming but unable to leave her lips. He closed the hood gently, as if finishing a prayer. "There," he said, "she's breathing again." He turned away, wiping his hands on his jacket. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something rare, the kind of precision that can't be learned, only remembered. Emily stepped forward. "How did you—" He cut her off softly. "Just needed to listen. Engines talk if you still know how to hear them." She blinked, caught between logic and awe. "Do you want money?" she asked finally. He shook his head. "No, just that sandwich you mentioned." Emily nodded slowly, gesturing toward the break room. "Give the man something to eat," she told one of her staff. The others hesitated, unsure what to do next. The camera that had been filming lowered quietly. Nobody laughed now. As the man sat in the corner with his plate, Emily walked over. He ate slowly, neatly, like someone who still remembered manners from a better life. She asked, "What's your name?" He hesitated for a moment, as if saying it might break something fragile. "Henry," he said finally. "Henry Miller." Emily smiled faintly. "Well, Henry Miller, you've just made me question every certification in this building." He smiled too. Barely. "Sometimes paper doesn't teach what pavement can." She laughed softly, unsure what that meant, but certain it meant something. When he finished eating, he stood, nodded to her once, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "Thank you for the meal." Then he disappeared into the fading light. No one followed. No one spoke for a long time. Emily stood near the car, still idling smoothly, listening to the hum that now sounded like gratitude. She whispered to herself, "Who the hell are you, Henry Miller?" Outside, the camera phone that had filmed his arrival uploaded the clip to the internet. Within hours, it would reach millions. But for now, the city swallowed his shadow as he walked down the street, a ghost of speed and silence, carrying nothing but two hands that remembered greatness and a heart still trying to forgive itself. The next morning, Los Angeles woke up to another storm. Not of rain, but of screens. A short video, 2 minutes long, had made its way across the internet overnight. A homeless man fixing a McLaren in exchange for food. The caption read, "This guy fixed what engineers couldn't for a sandwich." By sunrise, it had over 5 million views. By noon, 20. Everyone had an opinion. Fake. Staged. Dude's a savant. Who is this man? Car forums broke down every frame. Experts analyzed his movements, the way he touched the car, how his hands moved with precision, like a pianist who never forgot the notes. Someone slowed the clip and pointed out a small scar across his right wrist. Another said, "That's the mark of someone who's spent decades in the pits. That man's no amateur." Meanwhile, Henry Miller didn't even know he'd gone viral. He had no phone, no connection to the noise. He spent his morning in the quiet alleys behind downtown LA, helping a man fix a broken bicycle chain, trading work for coffee and silence. Back at Westline Garage, things were different. The mechanics avoided Emily's eyes. The laughter from yesterday had turned into whispers. "You saw the video?" one of them asked. "Yeah, I did." "And?" He shrugged. "I think we made a fool out of the wrong man." Emily sat in her office, watching the clip on loop. There was something about it that wouldn't let her go. The way he approached the car, the way he spoke, the way he didn't care who was watching. She zoomed in on his face, those eyes. Not wild or lost, like most men living on the street. They were focused, calm, like a man who had already seen the finish line too many times. She leaned back in her chair, whispering, "Who are you, Henry Miller?" Outside, reporters started calling. Local stations wanted interviews. Car magazines sent emails asking if they could meet the mystery mechanic. Emily ignored them all. Something about the way he left made her feel protective. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. That afternoon, the shop was busier than usual. People driving by slowed down just to glance inside, hoping to spot him. Some even came in pretending to need service, asking, "Hey, is that the shop with the McLaren guy?" The young mechanic who filmed the video avoided eye contact every time someone mentioned it. He had become the villain in a story he never meant to start. Emily caught him at the coffee machine. "Jake," she said. He turned, uneasy. "Yeah, boss." She nodded toward the bay. "You posted that video, didn't you?" He looked down. "Yeah, I didn't mean for it to blow up like that. I was just laughing," she said softly. He nodded. Yeah, Emily sighed. Then maybe you should be the one to apologize when he comes back. Jake frowned. You think he'll come back? She looked at the door. He fixed a car no one else could, and he didn't even ask for money. If that's not a man with unfinished business, I don't know what is. She wasn't wrong, because somewhere across town, Henry was walking past a diner, his reflection following him in the glass. He stopped. For a moment, he saw not the worn, tired man he'd become, but the version of himself he used to be, younger, sharper, helmet in hand, crowd cheering. His name, Henry Miller, flashing across banners and screens. Then the vision faded. All that was left was the man who had walked away from everything. He took a deep breath and kept walking. Past the noise, past the screens, past the people who now unknowingly watched his ghost online. That night, the video reached national news. Mystery mechanic shocks the internet. Who is Henry Miller? Old racing fans started commenting. I swear I've seen this guy before. Those hands, I'd know them anywhere. A few even shared photos, blurred decades old, of a driver standing on a podium, a golden helmet under his arm, smiling with the confidence of a man who had outrun the world. One of them wrote, he was a legend in Formula America, fastest pit hand reflexes anyone had ever seen. They called him Steel Hand Miller. Then one day, he disappeared. Meanwhile, back at the garage, Emily closed up late. The others had gone home. She stood by the McLaren, the same car that had brought him in. The hood was spotless, but she could still see the outline of where his hands had been. She pressed her palm there, as if hoping to feel whatever he had felt. For a second, the world went quiet, and in that quiet, she understood something. It wasn't luck. It wasn't guessing. That man knew machines like priests know prayers. She whispered to herself, maybe you weren't fixing engines, Henry. Maybe you were fixing something else. She turned off the lights, but before leaving, she pinned a note to the wall near the counter. It read, if you come back, lunch is on me this time. Across town, Henry sat beneath an overpass, the city lights flickering above him like fading stars. He had a sandwich beside him, but he wasn't eating. He was staring at an old photo. Two faces, a woman and a little girl, smiling under the sun. He traced their outlines with his finger, then folded the photo gently and put it back in his jacket. He whispered, I fixed something today, baby girl, just not the right thing. The wind carried the sound away, and somewhere in the distance, an engine roared, the same kind of roar that once made crowds stand to their feet. The sound lingered in the air, and for the first time in years, Henry closed his eyes and almost smiled. 2 weeks passed. The world had moved on, or at least pretended to, but online, the mystery of the man who fixed for food was far from over. Videos, podcasts, articles, everyone was looking for him. Some claimed to have seen him downtown. Others said he was just an actor. People argued about whether he was real, while the man himself walked the streets in silence, more invisible than ever. Henry had learned to live between the noise. He moved from one neighborhood to another, offering help where he could, fixing broken generators, changing tires, tuning old engines, always refusing money, always asking only for food. He slept behind a scrapyard now, a place that smelled of oil and rust, a place where broken things came to rest. He liked it there. Broken things didn't judge. One evening, as the city began to cool, Henry walked along a quiet road near the edge of town. The sunset painted everything in gold, and for a brief moment, he almost felt human again. Then he heard it, a faint cry, a woman's voice calling for help. He followed the sound and found a small car pulled over by the side of the road. A woman stood outside, panicked, and inside the car was a little girl, maybe 7, sitting in the back seat, crying softly. The woman looked up, startled when she saw him. Her first instinct was fear, a rough, bearded stranger approaching out of nowhere. Henry raised his hands gently. "It's okay, ma'am. I'm not here to bother you. What happened?" She hesitated. "The car. It just died. I need to get to the hospital. My daughter, she has asthma. Her inhaler's at home." Henry looked under the hood. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need to. Something in his calm presence disarmed her. He listened for a moment, fingers tracing the engine like a surgeon feeling for a pulse. Then he said softly, "Fuel pump relay. It's stuck. Give me a minute." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small screwdriver, one he'd carried for years, and began working. The woman watched, unsure whether to hope or panic. The girl coughed inside the car. Henry glanced at her and smiled. "It's all right, sweetheart. We'll get you moving. Just a quick pit stop." The girl blinked through tears, not understanding the words, but somehow trusting the tone. Within minutes, the engine came back to life. Henry closed the hood gently. "There you go," he said. "Drive steady. You'll make it." The woman looked at him, eyes wide. "How did you—" He shrugged. "Machines talk. You just have to listen." She reached for her purse. He raised a hand. "Don't. Just take her home." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Henry smiled faintly. "Then don't. Just promise me you'll drive slower next time." She nodded, climbed into the car, and drove away into the fading light. The girl turned around in the back seat, watching him through the window until he disappeared behind them. Across town, Emily Carter sat in her office at Westline Garage, scrolling through her phone after hours. Another day, another headline about the sandwich mechanic. Every outlet wanted a piece of the story, but she didn't want the fame. She wanted the truth. She had replayed that day in her mind too many times, the sound of the engine, the calm in his voice, the weight of his silence. She'd even gone to shelters, asked around, shown his picture from the video. No one had seen him. Some said he came and went like a ghost. Then her phone buzzed. A message from her friend, a paramedic. "You won't believe this. Guy fixed a car on the 405 for a mom and kid. Didn't take $1. Said his name was Henry." Emily's heart jumped. She grabbed her keys and left. By the time she found the spot, the sun had already set. The road was empty now, but on the curb lay a small rag, black with grease. She picked it up and smiled. "Still cleaning up the world, huh?" she whispered. She drove slowly through the streets near the scrapyards, looking for him. She didn't know what she would say if she found him, only that she needed to. Finally, she saw him, sitting behind a chain-link fence, working on an old pickup with a flashlight balanced on the hood. He looked up as her car pulled over, the same calm eyes, the same quiet dignity. Emily stepped out. "Henry?" He blinked. "Miss Carter." She smiled. "You remember me?" "I remember people who listen," he said. She looked at the truck, then back at him. "You're still fixing things." He shrugged. "Still eating," she laughed softly. "News says you're a celebrity now." He looked down at the wrench in his hand. "Then the news must be bored." Emily took a breath. "You helped a mother today, saved her kid." He didn't look up. She saved herself. "I just turned the key." Silence stretched between them, the kind that's heavy with things neither one knows how to say. Finally, she spoke. "Henry, why don't you let us help you? You could work with us. You're too good to be out here." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the truck. "Some engines don't belong in the showroom anymore, Emily. They just keep others running." She studied him for a long time. The way he spoke, The way he carried the weight of someone who had once owned the world and lost it. "Who were you, Henry?" she asked softly. He stopped tightening the bolt. The question hung in the air. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Just a man who went too fast and forgot what really mattered." She wanted to ask more, but something in his voice told her not to. Instead, she nodded slowly and said, "If you ever get tired of running, there's a job waiting for you." Henry looked at her, a faint flicker of something, maybe hope, passing through his eyes. Then he said quietly, "Thank you, Ms. Carter, but some ghosts fix better from the dark." She smiled sadly. "Then I'll keep the lights on anyway." Emily got back in her car and drove away, the reflection of his flashlight shrinking in her rearview mirror. Henry stood there, watching the taillights fade, then looked up at the sky, the same stars he used to chase on the racetrack, now chasing him instead. He whispered softly, "Lesson 1. Slow down before the turn." The city was silent, but somewhere deep inside, something old and broken had started to move again. By the third week, the mystery had outgrown the man. Every corner of the internet now echoed the same question. Who is Henry Miller? The clip of him fixing the McLaren had become one of those rare digital stories that refused to fade. News anchors debated it, car enthusiasts argued over it, and motivational channels started using his image in videos about humility and skill. Someone slowed down the footage, highlighting how his left hand moved before the right, and said that no modern mechanic worked that way anymore. Another video compared his motion to an old Formula One pit stop from decades ago, a blur of identical precision. Emily Carter watched the storm unfold from her office, feeling both pride and unease. She had seen Henry twice since that first encounter, both times under bridges or near junkyards, helping strangers, never staying in one place long enough to be thanked. The more the internet tried to glorify him, the more he seemed to run from it. Late one night, after closing the shop, Emily scrolled through an online forum dedicated to classic racing. The title of one post stopped her, "Steel Hand is still alive." She clicked it. Inside were grainy screenshots, old TV footage, pit lane interviews, podium celebrations. There he was, young, clean-shaven, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes sharp as lightning. Henry Miller, the Steel Hand. A name she hadn't heard before, but one that clearly meant something to thousands of people commenting below. The posts told the story, piece by piece. Henry had been one of America's most promising drivers in Formula Grand, the youngest to win 3 national circuits back-to-back, but during his peak, tragedy struck. In 2005, a crash at Willow Springs killed his wife and daughter, who had been waiting for him in the pit area when debris from another car hit the sidelines. He'd walked away without a scratch. His family hadn't. After that, he vanished. No interviews, no statements, no farewell. His team disbanded, his sponsors left, and within a year, Steel Hand Miller became a ghost, another legend swallowed by silence. Emily leaned back, heart heavy. It didn't seem real. The same man who'd eaten quietly in her garage now carried a history written in gasoline and grief. She closed the laptop and sat for a long moment in the dark, the hum of the city outside blending with the noise of her thoughts. The next morning, she gathered her team before opening hours. "Listen," she said, "the man who fixed that McLaren, Henry, he's not just some drifter. He was one of the best drivers this country ever had." The room went silent. Even Jake, the young mechanic who'd once laughed, stared in disbelief. "You're serious?" he asked. "He's that guy," Emily nodded. "The guy the world forgot." Jake swallowed hard. "We should find him. I mean, we owe him that, right?" Emily nodded again but didn't speak. Finding him was easier said than done. Henry moved like water, impossible to hold, impossible to follow. That afternoon, the world decided to find him for her. A news van parked outside Westline Garage, then another. Within hours, the sidewalk filled with cameras, curious locals and car fans, holding printed photos from his racing days. They all wanted a quote, a sighting, a trace, but Henry was nowhere to be found. By sunset, the attention became overwhelming. Emily closed early and slipped out through the back door. She drove across the city, guided only by instinct and maybe something else. She ended up near the old industrial district, where factories met forgotten freeways. The last light of day bounced off rusted metal and broken glass. There, by the shadow of an abandoned warehouse, she spotted him, sitting beside a half-built motorcycle, his hands black with grease, a small transistor radio humming beside him. When he saw her car, he didn't move. He just watched, calm but cautious. Emily stepped out and approached slowly. "Henry," she called softly, "they're looking for you." He wiped his hands on a rag, his voice low. "They've been looking for me for 20 years. Why stop now?" Emily hesitated. "They know who you are." He looked down at the ground. "No, they know who I was." She took a step closer. "You can't keep hiding forever." He smiled faintly, that same tired smile she remembered from the garage. "I'm not hiding. I'm repairing." "Repairing what?" she asked. He looked at the motorcycle. "Whatever I can reach." Emily crouched down beside him. "You were Steelhand Miller. You changed the way people raced. You saved lives with your designs. Don't you think people deserve to know you're alive?" Henry's eyes flickered, a brief flash of pain beneath all that calm. "They don't need me alive. They just need the idea of me. That's cleaner." Emily shook her head. "No, they need the man, the one who fixes without asking, the one who listens. The world could use a little more of that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed quietly behind them, streetlights flickering to life one by one. Finally, Henry stood, wiping his hands. "Do me a favor," he said. "Don't tell them where I am. The more they chase, the less I can do what matters." Emily frowned. "And what's that?" He looked out at the empty street, making peace with the wreckage. She wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. There was no bitterness there, only exhaustion, like a man who had already lived too many endings. "Henry," she said softly, "if you ever want to come back, the door's open." He nodded, eyes distant. "You keep fixing engines, Emily. I'll keep fixing people." She smiled sadly. "Then maybe we'll meet halfway." She walked back to her car and drove away, her headlights painting a path through the darkness. In the rearview mirror, she saw him standing there alone, still, framed against the fading neon glow of the city. That night, she couldn't sleep. The headlines wouldn't leave her mind, and neither would his words. Somewhere between the noise of fame and the silence of guilt, a man who once chased speed was now chasing redemption. And though the internet was screaming his name, Henry Miller remained what he'd become long ago, a legend not reborn, but repaired. 3 days later, Los Angeles woke under rain, the kind of rain that doesn't rush, the kind that lingers, as if washing away memories. Emily sat in her car across from the old raceway. The sign above the gate was faded now, the paint cracked, the letters barely holding on, Willow Springs International Raceway. She had driven here after reading one last forum post, one that described, in painful detail, the day Henry Miller disappeared. It had been 20 years ago. A routine exhibition race. His wife and daughter waiting in the pit zone, proud and smiling. A crash in turn 8, not his, but another car's, sent debris flying through the fence. The engine cover came loose like a bullet. The footage stopped before showing what happened next. Henry crossed the finish line seconds later, unaware. When he stopped and saw the wreckage, something inside him broke that day and never started again. Emily sat there for a long time, the rain tapping against the windshield like a heartbeat. She didn't know why she came, maybe to understand what kind of pain could silence a man for 2 decades. She stepped out of the car, the wind sharp, the track empty. The asphalt was cracked and wet, but in her mind she could almost hear it alive again, the sound of engines, cheers, the smell of burned rubber. And she could see him there, young Henry, the steel hand, leaning against his car before the start, smiling without knowing that joy had an expiration date. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You've been running from ghosts, Henry. Maybe it's time to stop." That evening, she found him again. A contact from a local outreach group said he sometimes helped at a community garage under the freeway, repairing cars for veterans. When she arrived, the lights were dim, the air thick with oil and rain. Inside, Henry sat alone on a stool, staring at a small photo propped against the wall, the same one she'd seen him hold before, his daughter's smile, frozen in sunlight. He didn't turn when she entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should you," she replied, stepping closer. "You've been fixing cars in the dark for people who don't even know your name." "That's the point," he said. Emily walked to the bench and picked up the photo. "She's beautiful," she said softly. He nodded, eyes distant. She loved the smell of gasoline, said it smelled like winning. A sad smile crossed his face. "Guess she got that from me." The silence that followed was heavy, but honest. Emily finally asked, "Why did you stop racing?" He looked up then, not angry, not defensive, just tired. "I didn't stop," he said. "I crashed, not on the track or in here." He tapped his chest lightly. "When it happened, I kept asking God why it wasn't me. Why I walked away without a scratch. I thought maybe if I disappeared, the guilt would fade, but it didn't. It just changed shape." He rubbed his hands together, the calloused skin catching the light. "These hands used to build machines that outran the wind. Now they patch up strangers' engines for sandwiches." Emily placed the photo back on the table. "You could have chosen anger. You chose work. That says something." He shook his head. "Work doesn't forgive you. It just keeps you from thinking." "Then maybe it's time to stop working and start healing," she said. Henry looked at her, something flickering behind his eyes, a mix of disbelief and yearning. "People like me don't heal, Emily. We just run until the gas runs out." "Then let me help refill the tank," she said softly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Finally, Henry exhaled. "You don't know what you're offering." "I do," she said. "A second chance. The same one you've been giving everyone else." He looked away, jaw tightening. "I don't belong in your world anymore. I don't belong in any." She stepped closer. "You belong wherever your purpose is. Maybe it's not behind a wheel anymore. Maybe it's behind a wrench, teaching others to build again." Henry's eyes softened. He looked back at the photo. "I promised her I'd teach her to drive. Never got the chance." Emily smiled gently. "Then teach someone else's daughter. Keep the promise anyway." The words landed like rain on dry soil. Slowly, he stood, shoulders heavy but straighter than before. "Why do you care so much?" he asked. "Because I've seen what happens when people give up," she said. "And because you remind me of my father. He fixed planes, said engines were like people. They just needed to feel useful again." Henry chuckled quietly. "Smart man." "He died before retirement," she said softly. "Never slowed down. I think you two would have gotten along." For the first time, Henry smiled, really smiled. "Maybe, but he probably would have told me to clean up first." She laughed, and the sound seemed to break the heaviness in the room. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you out of here. You don't have to go back to racing. Just come back to life." He hesitated, glancing at the picture one last time. Then he picked it up and slipped it carefully into his pocket. "All right," he said quietly, "but only because I'm out of coffee." Emily smiled. "I'll buy you a whole pot." They left together, the rain easing into mist as they walked toward her car. The city lights shimmered off the wet streets like broken constellations. Inside the car, Henry watched the world through the passenger window. The people, the noise, the chaos. He hadn't realized how alive everything still was. He whispered almost to himself, "Feels strange being back on track." Emily glanced at him. "Then maybe you just needed the right team again." He didn't answer, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost. Later that night, as he lay on the cot Emily arranged for him at a small apartment above the shop, Henry stared at the ceiling. The hum of the city below sounded like the engines he once commanded, familiar, comforting. He closed his eyes and imagined the racetrack again, not as a place of pain, but of return. And somewhere, in the quiet of his memory, he heard his daughter's laughter, light, untouchable, free. He whispered softly, "Lesson 2, you can't fix the past, but you can stop breaking the present." And with that, Henry Miller, the lost racer, the fallen legend, finally slept. The morning Henry Miller returned to Westline Garage, the sun seemed to break differently, not louder, just clearer. He wore the same jacket, the same worn boots, but something in his posture had changed. His shoulders no longer sagged under invisible weight. He walked slower, but every step had intention, like a man who'd made peace with his ghosts and was now ready to face the living. Emily met him at the door, smiling softly. "You showed up," she said. Henry looked around the room, the smell of oil and polish filling the air. "I said I would." She nodded toward the corner. "Coffee's fresh. Tools are where you left them. Well, where you left other people's." He smirked faintly. "I'll try not to fix anything that's already working." Jake, the young mechanic who once mocked him, stood nearby, pretending to organize wrenches. When their eyes met, Jake froze. "Hey, Mr. Miller?" Henry tilted his head. "Henry's fine." Jake scratched his neck, voice uneven. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry, for the way I acted." Henry studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Then stop acting." Jake blinked, unsure what to say. Henry continued, softer now. "You learn faster when you stop pretending you already know." Jake nodded, almost relieved, and went back to work with new humility. By mid-morning, the shop buzzed with energy. Customers arrived curious to see him, the man from the videos, the living legend reborn in grease and steel. Some came with genuine admiration, others with skepticism. Henry didn't care. He wasn't there for applause. He worked silently, teaching by motion. He didn't command attention, he attracted it. A journalist from Autoline Weekly showed up around noon, camera in hand. "Mr. Miller," she began, "the world thought you were dead. What brought you back?" Henry didn't look up from the carburetor he was tuning. "A sandwich," he said simply. The crew laughed softly, thinking it was a joke. Emily, watching from the doorway, knew better. Later that afternoon, a convoy of luxury cars pulled into the lot. Matte Ferraris, Lamborghinis, engines purring like lions. Out stepped a tall man in a custom suit, phone in one hand, ego in the other. Dylan Ross, billionaire investor, influencer, and owner of one of Westline's most lucrative contracts. He scanned the garage with a smirk. "So this is the famous miracle mechanic." Emily stepped forward. "Dylan, maybe come back later. He cut her off. "Relax, Em. I just wanted to see the show." He looked at Henry, eyes narrowing. "I've seen your clips. Cute story. Old man fixes supercar. World claps. You know, if this were a movie, they'd call it The Rusty Redeemer." A few people laughed nervously. Henry didn't. He wiped his hands with a rag and said, "You got something broken you want me to look at?" Dylan grinned. "Actually, yeah, my car's making a sound. Probably something you wouldn't understand. It's a LaFerrari Aperta. Cost more than your whole life." Henry nodded calmly. "Money makes noise too. Bring it in." Dylan rolled his eyes but tossed the keys to Jake. Let the legend work his magic. Within minutes, Henry diagnosed the problem. A damaged electrical relay, simple but precise. Dylan stood nearby, recording him for his followers. "Look at this, folks. The great Henry Miller, fixing my LaFerrari. What an honor, right?" Henry glanced up. "No, son. The honor's in learning how to listen to what you don't understand." The line hit harder than a punch. Even Dylan went quiet for a moment. Henry replaced the part, closed the hood, and started the car. The engine purred perfectly. Dylan clapped mockingly. "Bravo. Guess you still got it." Henry turned off the ignition and handed him the keys. "You don't fix cars by guessing. You fix them by respect. Maybe try that with people too." The crowd stayed silent. Dylan looked around, cheeks tight with embarrassment. Emily stepped forward before the moment could turn cruel. "We're done here, Dylan," he smirked, trying to recover. "Sure, keep your mascot. He's good for business." Then he got into his car and drove off, tires screaming against the pavement, the sound of pride losing traction. Henry watched him leave and murmured, "Lesson 3. The faster you drive for attention, the sooner you crash into yourself." Emily smiled faintly. "You should start writing those down." He shook his head. "I already did. I just forgot to read them." That night, as the shop quieted, Henry stayed late cleaning tools. Jake approached him again. "Why'd you let him talk like that?" Henry didn't look up. "Because he needed to hear himself first." Jake frowned. "I would have said something." Henry nodded. "That's why you're still learning." Jake half smiled, half wondered how someone could win arguments by saying so little. As Henry turned off the lights, he caught his reflection in the shop window, older, slower, but steady. He whispered softly, "You're not fixing engines anymore, Miller. You're fixing rhythm." For the first time, he didn't feel like a ghost among the living. He felt like a man tuning the heartbeat of the world again. Over the next few weeks, Westline Garage changed, not from the outside, but from the inside. The music in the background was quieter, the laughter more genuine. People arrived earlier, stayed later. It wasn't a workshop anymore, it was a classroom. Henry never lectured, he demonstrated. When Jake asked about torque angles or compression ratios, Henry would say, "Feel it. Machines tell you what they want if you stop forcing them to speak your language." They started calling his lessons steel hand rules. They weren't written anywhere, but everyone knew them. Rule 1, listen first, tighten later. Rule 2, never trust a clean wrench. Rule 3, every machine breaks for a reason, so does every man. Soon, the shop's reputation spread. People didn't come just to fix cars. They came to remember something about themselves. Homeless veterans, recovering addicts, young kids with nowhere to go, all started showing up, asking if they could help. Henry never turned them away. He'd hand them a rag or a socket and say, "Start by cleaning the tools. They've been waiting for good hands." One afternoon, Emily watched him teaching a group of teens how to change brake pads. The way he spoke, calm and patient, sounded more like a sermon than a lesson. When one of the boys asked why he cared so much, Henry smiled and said, "Because nobody did when I needed it." By evening, he sat outside the shop with a cup of coffee, the sound of laughter spilling from inside. Emily joined him. "You realize you've turned this place into a therapy group, right?" He chuckled. "Therapy's just fixing what people stop maintaining." She smiled. "So what's next, Pastor Miller? Going to start baptizing carburetors?" Henry laughed, shaking his head. "No, but I might start blessing patients." They sat in comfortable silence. watching the sun dip behind the skyline. Later that week, a reporter from a national racing magazine came by, offering an exclusive feature. "America loves a comeback story," she said. "You could inspire millions." Henry looked at her kindly. "Then tell them to stop waiting for permission to start theirs." He refused the interview. The story wasn't about fame anymore. One night, he returned home to find a letter slid under his door. It was from one of the kids at the shop. "Mr. Henry, when I came here, I wanted to steal a car. Now I want to build one. Thank you for showing me the difference." Henry read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it beside the photo of his daughter. He whispered, "Lesson 4. You fix the world by fixing one life at a time." Months passed. Westline Garage became known across the city as the Steel Hand Shop. No one asked for luxury clients anymore. They worked for meaning, and somehow, profit followed purpose. Henry didn't just repair engines now, he restored people. Every wrench he turned seemed to tighten something inside himself, too. He'd found a new race, one without speed, trophies, or applause. A race of patience, humility, and grace. And for the first time since that day at Willow Springs, Henry Miller wasn't running from the past anymore. He was driving toward something real. It had been 6 months since Henry Miller returned to the light. 6 months since the man who once outran thunder decided to slow down long enough to listen. Westline Garage had become something no one planned but everyone needed. Part workshop, part school, part sanctuary. People came not just with broken cars, but with broken lives, and somehow both left running smoother. Emily often joked that Henry's tools worked better on hearts than engines. He'd smile and say, "That's because both need oil, just different kinds." The city began to notice. Reporters who once chased scandal now chased sincerity. Local news called it the Miracle Garage. Even a national magazine published a feature titled "From Fastest Man Alive to Slowest Teacher in Town." Henry laughed when he saw it. "They finally got my speed right," he said. But not everyone saw the beauty in slowing down. One Thursday morning, an envelope arrived addressed to Mr. Henry Miller. The letterhead was familiar, the emblem of the National Formula Grand Association. Emily brought it to him with raised eyebrows. "Looks like the racetrack wants their ghost back," she said. Henry opened it slowly, reading in silence. Then he handed it to her. They were inviting him to the National Revival Cup, an anniversary race held once every 5 years, the same event where his career had ended 2 decades ago. This time, they wanted him as a guest of honor. Emily's eyes widened. "That's huge. They're basically asking you to come home." Henry shook his head. "Home's where the tools are, not the trophies." She smiled gently. "Still, maybe it's time to visit the past without staying there." He didn't answer, but that night he sat awake for hours, staring at the invitation. He traced the logo with his finger, the same one that once stood for everything he'd lost. He whispered softly, "Lesson 5. Sometimes the past doesn't knock to haunt you. It knocks to see if you've changed enough to open the door." The event day came faster than he expected. Henry didn't plan to go, but fate often ignores plans. That morning, one of his apprentices, Miguel, a 19-year-old kid with grease-stained hands and dreams too big for his wallet, came running into the shop, pale and panicked. "Mr. Miller, my brother's car, it crashed on the way to the Revival Cup qualifiers. He was supposed to race today." Henry froze. "Is he okay?" Miguel nodded. "He's fine, but the car's done. The race starts in 2 hours. He's got sponsors, commitments. If he doesn't show, it's over." The boy's voice cracked, a mixture of fear and shame. Henry looked at the trembling hands clutching the ticket. Then he looked at the clock. "Bring it here," he said. Within minutes, they hauled in what was left of the car, a battered stock racer, front frame crushed, engine leaking oil like blood. Jake whistled. "There's no way we can fix that in 2 hours." Henry rolled up his sleeves. "Then we better stop talking." The garage roared to life. Sparks flew, wrenches turned, the air filled with the rhythm of urgency. Henry moved like a conductor orchestrating chaos, precise, fast, calm. His students mirrored his energy, their faces streaked with sweat and hope. Miguel hovered nearby, watching as Henry's hands worked with the same intuition that once ruled racetracks. It was like watching memory come alive. Emily stepped close. "You're doing this again, aren't you?" He didn't look up. "Doing what?" "Racing without a car." He smiled faintly. "I told you, Emily. My races don't need laps anymore. Just hearts." She nodded, eyes glistening. 2 hours later, the engine fired. Loud, proud, alive. The students cheered. Henry simply wiped his brow and said, "Get your brother ready." But Miguel hesitated. "Sir, he can't race." "The doctors won't clear him for it." Henry turned slowly. "What?" Miguel swallowed. "He sprained his shoulder. They said he's out, but he's begging to keep his spot. If he doesn't, he loses the contract." Emily stepped in. "Then maybe it's time for someone else to take the wheel." They both looked at Henry. He shook his head immediately. "No, I'm not that man anymore." But the garage was silent. Every pair of eyes turned to him, the legend, the teacher, the one who told them to face what scared them most. Miguel said softly, "You taught me engines can be rebuilt, Mr. Miller. Maybe it's your turn." Henry closed his eyes. The weight of memory pressed down like gravity. He could almost hear his daughter's voice, the one that used to echo in the stands, cheering him on. When he opened his eyes again, they weren't full of fear. They were full of resolve. "Get me the suit," he said quietly. An hour later, the Revival Cup was underway. The crowd roared as the cars lined up. But when Henry Miller stepped onto the track in his old colors, the noise changed. It wasn't cheering. It was disbelief. Cameras zoomed in, faces turned, whispers spread like wildfire. "The steel hand! That can't be him!" Is this a tribute? Is he really going to drive? Emily stood by the pit wall, headset on, heart pounding. Jake adjusted the fuel gauge. Miguel stood beside him, eyes wide with pride and fear. When Henry climbed into the car, time seemed to fold in on itself. The leather seat, the smell of rubber, the hum beneath his fingertips. All of it was a language his soul still spoke fluently. He whispered under his breath, "All right, baby girl, let's make this one count." The green light flashed, the car shot forward, tires gripping the asphalt with fury. For the first few laps, he stayed behind, feeling the rhythm, testing the limits, not of the car, but of himself. Every curve was a conversation with ghosts. Every straight line was forgiveness. Halfway through, rain began to fall. Light at first, then harder. The track turned slick, the world blurred into streaks of silver and sound. A rookie driver ahead lost control, spinning wildly across the lane. Henry swerved, instincts firing like lightning, guiding the car with impossible precision. He avoided collision by inches, the crowd gasping in unison. "Still got it," Jake whispered from the pit. Emily smiled through tears. He never lost it. Lap after lap, Henry held steady, not chasing the lead, just driving with grace, not to win, but to return something that the world, and he himself, had lost. On the final lap, he eased off the accelerator, letting a young racer pass him at the finish line. The crowd roared anyway. It wasn't about who crossed first, it was about who finally stopped running from the crash. Henry parked the car, stepped out slowly, helmet under his arm. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust toward him. "How does it feel to be back? What brought you here today? What do you say to your fans after all these years?" He looked around, water dripping from his face, his voice calm and clear. "I didn't come here to race," he said. "I came here to remember." The silence that followed was deeper than applause. It was the sound of understanding. He continued, You can't undo what's been lost, but you can drive forward, knowing that every mile you travel with purpose brings someone else closer to hope. He handed his helmet to Miguel. This belongs to you now. Just promise me one thing. Miguel nodded, trembling. Anything, Henry smiled. Drive for something that matters. That night, the highlight replay of the race flooded every network, the return of Steelhand Miller. But for once, Henry didn't watch. He sat quietly at the garage with Emily, coffee in hand, rain tapping on the roof again. She said softly, "You know you could have won that race." He smiled. "I already did." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Henry looked at the helmet resting beside them. "Because today wasn't about finishing first, it was about finishing finally." He leaned back, closing his eyes, listening to the rain. For the first time in 20 years, it didn't sound like morning. It sounded like peace. By morning, the world already had its miracle headline, the return of Steelhand Miller, the legend who refused to die. Every news network, every sports show, every corner of the internet replayed the same moment. The silver car slicing through the rain, the man who once vanished crossing the line again, not first, but free. Clips of the race flooded social media, accompanied by captions like "Grace over speed," "The man who drove for peace," and "Redemption on four wheels." For the first time in 2 decades, the name Henry Miller wasn't whispered. It was celebrated, but Henry didn't see any of it. While the world shouted his name, he was back at the garage, cleaning the tools from the night before. The shop was quiet, the smell of fuel and coffee filling the space. Emily arrived with a newspaper in her hand, the headline blazing across the front page. "You made history again?" she said. Henry didn't look up. "History's overrated. I'm just glad Miguel's brother still has a sponsor." Emily smiled. "That's not all you fixed, Henry." He finally looked at her. "You mean the car?" "I mean yourself," he chuckled softly. "Careful, you'll ruin my reputation as a broken man." She stepped closer. "You may not like attention, but you need to see what you've done. People are calling, writing, asking for interviews. Even the association wants to name a mentorship program after you." Henry sighed. "The world loves stories with clean endings. But life doesn't work like that. It's messy, slow, and full of noise." "Maybe," Emily said, "but sometimes the noise wakes people up." 2 days later, the inevitable happened. The press found him. Cameras lined the street outside Westline Garage. News vans blocked the entrance. A crowd gathered, holding signs and photos. Some old fans, some just curious. They weren't there for gossip or scandal. They were there for something rarer: truth. Emily tried to manage the chaos, but Henry waved her off. "It's all right," he said. "Let them come." He stepped outside, his hands still stained with oil, his expression calm. Microphones pointed toward him like weapons of light. "Mr. Miller, why did you come back after all these years? What did that race mean to you? Do you plan to compete again?" Henry waited until the noise died down. Then he spoke, not loudly, but with the weight of a man who'd earned silence. "I came back," he said slowly, "because running away stopped working." The crowd quieted. "For 20 years, I blamed myself for what I lost. I thought if I disappeared, I could bury the guilt. But guilt doesn't stay buried. It just grows roots. You have to dig it out, piece by piece, until there's room for something better." A woman near the front wiped her eyes. A man recording lowered his phone. Henry continued, "That race wasn't about winning. It was about proving that broken things still work, just differently. And sometimes that's enough." One of the reporters asked, "Do you see yourself as an inspiration?" Henry smiled faintly. "No, I see myself as proof that grace can look like grease." The crowd laughed softly, but not out of humor, out of understanding. He looked around at the faces, then added quietly, "If you want to honor me, don't cheer. Just find something or someone that's broken and help them start again. That's how we win now." There was no applause when he finished, just silence, the kind of silence that happens when words hit the right place. Then a single person clapped, then another. Soon the sound spread, slow, steady, genuine, not thunderous, grateful. Henry nodded once, stepped back inside, and closed the door behind him. That evening, Emily found him sitting at the workbench, staring at his old helmet. It was scratched, faded, but still carried the same energy. "They want to make a documentary," she said. "Your story, your comeback, everything." Henry didn't move. "Then tell them to film the kids instead." She frowned. "What kids?" He gestured toward the list on the wall, names of young apprentices and volunteers who now filled the shop. "They're the real story," he said. "They're the ones fixing the world, one bolt at a time." Emily sat beside him. "You can't hide forever, Henry." He smiled gently. "I'm not hiding. I'm passing the torch before I burn it out." She studied him for a moment. "And what will you do then?" He thought for a long time, then said, "Build something that lasts longer than my name." A week later, he did exactly that. Using the donations that flooded in after the race, Henry announced the creation of a new initiative, a non-profit workshop called Steel Hands Foundation. Its mission to train homeless veterans, recovering addicts, and at-risk youth in mechanics, engineering, and life discipline. When a reporter asked him why he chose that name, he smiled. Because strong hands aren't born, they're rebuilt. The story spread again, but this time it wasn't about racing or fame. It was about purpose. Within months, people from all over the country wrote letters, parents thanking him for changing their sons' lives, soldiers saying he gave them back their dignity, even old rivals from the track sending notes of respect. Henry read them all, quietly, usually late at night after everyone else had gone home. He never replied publicly, but he kept every single one in a drawer beside his daughter's photo. One evening, after a long day at the Foundation's new training center, Henry sat on the porch outside, watching the sunset. Miguel joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You know, Mr. Miller," the young man said, "when I first met you, I thought you were crazy. You fixed cars like they were alive." Henry chuckled. "That's because they are. Machines breathe. People just forget to listen." Miguel nodded. "You ever miss racing?" Henry took a slow sip of coffee. "Every day, but not the speed, the focus, the silence before the turn." "Then why don't you go back?" Miguel asked. Henry smiled. "Because I finally found a finish line worth crossing." They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city faint in the distance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry whispered more to himself than anyone else. Lesson 6. The real race never ends. It just changes tracks. Miguel didn't understand fully, but he smiled anyway. Inside, the lights of the Steel Hands Foundation glowed warm and steady, illuminating rows of young men and women bent over engines, learning, laughing, rebuilding, exactly what Henry had dreamed of. The legend had returned, but not to race again. He returned to teach others how to keep moving, even when life stalls. 1 year later, the city had changed, or maybe it just started noticing what had always been there. On the corner of Franklin Avenue, where an abandoned lot once gathered dust and rust, stood a new building, simple, honest. The sign above the door read, "Steel Hands Garage," and beneath it, in smaller letters, "We fix more than engines." It wasn't shiny like the high-end shops across town, no chrome walls, no spotless marble floors, but every bolt, every tool, every hand that worked inside carried pride and history. Henry Miller had built it from scratch with his own team, Emily, Jake, Miguel, and dozens of apprentices who had once been lost themselves. Now, every sound that came from within, the whir of drills, the tap of hammers, the hum of laughter, felt like redemption put to rhythm. Each morning, Henry arrived before sunrise. He'd sweep the floor, check the benches, start the coffee pot, and whisper a small prayer of thanks before the others came in. Not because he was religious, but because gratitude had become his faith. When the trainees arrived, he'd greet them one by one. No titles, no pity, just respect. He treated them as equals, because he knew what it felt like to be invisible. One afternoon, Emily walked into the garage to find him standing in front of a wall full of framed photos. Each photo told a story. A young mechanic shaking hands after his first certification, a veteran smiling beside a rebuilt engine, a single mother holding her diploma. At the center hung a single black and white image, Henry's daughter, sitting on the hood of his old race car, her smile bright enough to outshine every trophy he'd ever won. Emily stepped beside him quietly. "She'd be proud," she said. Henry smiled faintly. "I like to think she's the one keeping the lights on." Emily looked at him. "You've done it, Henry. You built something real." He shook his head. "We did. You stayed when the rest of the world left. That counts." She chuckled softly. "I didn't stay for you. I stayed for what you made us believe again." Henry turned toward her. "And what's that?" "That broken things are just unfinished stories," she said. He smiled at that. "Then let's keep writing." That evening, the garage hosted its first official graduation. 20 students receiving certificates, 20 new lives tuned and ready. Families gathered. Local reporters covered the event, and the sound of applause filled the place where silence used to live. When the speeches ended, someone called Henry to the front. He hesitated, wiping his hands on a rag, but Emily pushed him forward. He stepped up, microphone in hand, the crowd waiting. He looked around, the faces, the laughter, the warmth, and for a moment he couldn't speak. Then he smiled. "I never thought I'd see this day," he began. "Not because I didn't believe in you, but because I stopped believing in me." The room grew quiet. "There was a time I thought the only thing I could fix was an engine. Turns out, engines were just the excuse. What I was really fixing was faith. Mine, and maybe yours too." He paused, eyes glistening. "I spent half my life chasing speed. The rest I spent running from pain. But grace caught me anyway, right here, covered in oil, surrounded by people who taught me that purpose isn't something you find, it's something you give." The crowd stayed still, listening. Henry continued, "If you leave this place with anything, let it be this. You are not defined by what broke you. You are defined by what you choose to rebuild." He smiled, set the microphone down, and stepped away to a standing ovation that felt less like celebration and more like gratitude. Later that night, after the last guest left and the lights dimmed, Henry stood alone in the quiet. The moonlight spilled across the garage floor, glinting off the tools. He walked over to his old helmet, now sitting on a shelf above the workbench. He ran his fingers along the scratches. "That's enough laps for one lifetime," he whispered. From the office window, Emily watched him, arms folded, smiling softly. She knew better than to interrupt that moment. Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out the small photograph of his wife and daughter. He placed it gently beside the helmet, straightened it, and nodded once, a gesture that said everything words couldn't. "Lesson 7, he said quietly. "The finish line isn't a place, it's a person you become." The next morning, the city woke to sunlight breaking clean across the skyline. At Steelhand's garage, the day began like any other, except it wasn't. A group of young trainees arrived early, eager to start. One of them, a shy girl with dark hair and grease on her cheek, looked up at Henry and asked, "Mr. Miller, How do you know when something's really fixed? Henry smiled. When it stops making noise. She frowned playfully. But what if it still does? He chuckled. Then you listen closer. The girl nodded, not realizing she'd just heard the essence of his entire life. As the hours passed, the garage filled with the music of movement, the hum of tools, bursts of laughter, engines coming back to life. And somewhere amid it all, Henry sat at his workbench, sketching on an old notepad. On the page was a design, not for a car, but for a symbol, two hands intertwined, one steel, one flesh, holding a bolt of light between them. Above it, he wrote in careful block letters, "Everything can be fixed if you're willing to get your hands dirty." He tore the page out and pinned it to the wall. That would be the new logo for Steel Hands Garage. Emily saw it later that day and smiled. "Looks like a legacy," she said. Henry shook his head. "No, just maintenance." That evening, as the sun set and the last car rolled out, Henry stepped outside. The air was warm, the horizon glowing orange. He leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, and watched the streetlights flicker to life. Behind him, laughter echoed, the voices of his students, his friends, his family now. For a moment, he closed his eyes and just listened. It wasn't the sound of engines anymore. It was the sound of living. He whispered softly, "Lesson 8, you don't win life by going faster. You win it by learning how to stop." He smiled to himself, breathing deeply, and as night fell over the city, the sign outside the garage, "Steel Hands Garage, we fix more than engines," flickered once, then glowed steady, lighting the street below. The man who once raced the wind now walked in peace. And though the world would remember him as Steelhand Miller, the legend who came back, Henry would always remember himself as something far simpler, a mechanic, a teacher, a man who finally learned that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when you've already crossed the line.